I've mentioned a few times this idea of neuro-linguistic programming. And for those of you who are not familiar with NLP, it was developed by two men, John Grinder and Richard Bandler. And it was Richard Bandler that I had interactions with over the years. And that was through my early days when I was first in California and set up a company called Brain Mind Research with two other fellows. And they were both associated with the John David Institute, which you may never have heard of. But John David was also a sound pioneer who had the most successful sound healing practice that has ever happened in the world. And he was right here in Carlsbad, where I am. He made all kinds of national news. He had a 8-page spread in Time magazine at one point. He had a huge, giant center, 14,000 square foot place in Carlsbad. And he was doing entrainment and primordial sounds and a bunch of other kind of things. His head sound engineer, a guy named Rich Stamper, and the head of logistics for his whole organization, Ed Smith, we all became business partners, and particularly around the space sounds, because Rich Stamper was a former Special Forces, so he had 5-star security clearance. So when we went to TRW to get the space sounds, to go through those space sounds and choose which ones that we could pull out, he was the one who was able to go past that 5-star security clearance to really go in there and choose what was going to come out. So we were 100% responsible for the space sounds being released to the public. And it was Rich Stamper's wife, who is a psychologist, who was friends with Richard Bandler. And through that connection, I met Richard Bandler. We spent, and I'd go with Richard, and we'd hang out for most of the day with him. And that was just a crazy, fascinating experience to be with this guy. He's kind of a genius madman. But the whole process of NLP involved communicating all the different types of ways that the system communicates with other people. Normally, when I'm talking with you, there's the impact of my voice. I'm shooting sound waves out in shaped packets of my voice. And those packets are going into your ears, and language is crunching away, and those sound packets have meaning, and that's language, and we communicate. But underlying that are layers and layers of communication that we're not necessarily consciously aware of. Some we are. My tone of voice, my inflection of my voice, my facial expressions, what I do with my body, how I move my hands. I can communicate all kinds of things by a myriad of subconscious tells. And now there's a whole profession of that in the FBI and the CIA, of showing slowed down movies of people's faces as they speak, and how they blink and how they look and what happens with their eyes and grimaces they make, are ways of evaluating other layers of communication straight from the unconscious mind, which may be directly conflicting with the words that are being said. I may be saying, "Trust me," when all my facial tells are telling that I'm saying a lie. Things like that. Well, NLP based its entire system on these subconscious levels of communication. And I saw many examples of what I saw Richard Bandler do that just kind of blew my mind. This idea that your words is one thing, the way that you word language, which words you choose in your sentences is all important, including the concept of Freudian slips, where you use the wrong word, which sends a subconscious tell of what you're really trying to say. The way you use your body and your senses. For instance, according to Neuro-Linguistic Programming, there are 3 different types of sensory acquisition: visual, auditory, kinesthetic, which divides people into 3 primary types of acquisition personalities: visual type people, auditory type people, kinesthetic type people. Here in California, we have a lot of kinesthetic types. They're the ones who are out early in the morning running on the beach, doing all kinds of physical exercises, yoga. People who are visual types tend to be dominant in our society because we're a visual dominant society. Television, movies, cell phones, computers, we're overloaded in our visual. The auditory type people, like musicians, audio engineers, things like that, and tend to be the class that is most disadvantaged in the 21st century. I started out as an artist. Actually, I started out as a musician, but I doodled all the time. And I went to art school. I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree, so I learned the visual arts in great depth and detail. I was a filmmaker for years, but I made my own soundtracks. So I was a visual artist and a musician at the same time, so I kind of was a combination of visual auditory. Then I went years later to chiropractic school and became a doctor and learned all the medical level of information about anatomy and physiology and biochemistry and physics and all that kind of stuff. So really I sort of have a diploma for my right brain and one for my left brain. I have a chiropractic degree, and I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree, and I've got 90-hour-long soundtracks sold everywhere all over the world. So, and the idea of using these headphones all the time and exposing myself to tens of thousands of hours of composing and soundtracks and creating in the acoustic realm with brain entrainment and synchronicity of the hemispheres. And so I've been synchronizing my hemispheres and training my brain waves for 40 years, and it's had its effect on me. But in one case, for instance, I'm sitting here at my computer and I use my left hand for my mouse, but I'm right-handed. But as time has gone on, I'm now ambidextrous. I pick things up with my feet. I can almost write my name with my foot. It's a strange and interesting phenomenon to observe in myself as my brain becomes more homogeneous and more synchronized. My ability to bring the scientific realm and the artistic realm together has really melded through the work that I do. When we go back, so also the way that you organize your thoughts and actions, what kind of body language tells a lot of things. There's a whole science of all of these things coming together in NLP that's pretty astounding. For instance, when you're talking to someone, just observing what they do with their eyes and where they move their eyes while they're talking gives you unconscious tells about where that information is coming from. So for instance, if they move their eyes over this way, the memory is being accessed from their auditory center or their visual center or their kinesthetic center. And so if you're talking to somebody and every time their eyes move this way, it's always up and to the right and never down here, this is a visual type person. Most of their input into their brain comes from their visual center. So that means that if you wanted to communicate with them and create an empathic bond, let's say that you're a therapist and you really want to connect with this person, you watch the tells, you see that their eye is always moving up and to the right. You know they're a visual type person, so you begin to structure your sentences to always include visual references. I see what you're talking about. But if the eyes were to move directly to the right, then I might change my wording to say, I hear you, or I grasp that. I can grasp that, which is a kinesthetic reference. Even though it doesn't seem like much, it causes a unconscious communication bond with this person who unconsciously, without their knowledge, is acknowledging, oh, this person's like me. So I saw, Richard Bandler do, for instance, if you look him up on television for his snake phobia, he did a snake phobia thing in 2 minutes flat on television on a talk show with the talk show host who is deathly afraid of snakes. And in just a couple of minutes, all he was doing was it looked like he was just talking to him. And in 2 to 3 minutes, this guy was over there touching a snake and holding the snake, a big one, a great big boa constrictor, with no fear. And so part of that was a concept in NLP called reframing, where you change how you look at something and your emotional reactions to that shift and change. And this is a big technique, this reframing technique. For instance, there was a woman who was obsessive compulsive disorder, where she would clean obsessively the house, and anytime anybody walked through on the carpet, they would change the shag design of the carpet with footprints, and she would come after them and vacuum them up so that the carpet was always smooth with no sign of anybody had traversed the carpet. And so he did this thing with her where he asked her, what would be one of the greater tragedies that you can imagine that would happen to you, that would break your heart? And she's thinking about it. He's saying, well, what about your family? What if your family was in a big car accident, everybody died except for you? What would the result of that be? You wouldn't have to sweep your carpet anymore. There would be no footprints to remove because nobody would be there. And that reframing changed everything. That one example, that all of a sudden she reframed the footprints on the carpet to be something sought after and something good and something that she rejoiced in, instead of something that, oh, you're messing up my perfect carpet. Those kind of ideas.